I missed it by that much. Hey Book Dragons, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about 10 book series that almost made my top 10, but not quite. They just barely missed being on the list, and we'll talk about why. Before we do, please make sure that you like this video. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any further content, and join my Discord. I would love to have you as part of my growing community, and I'm always excited to see it becoming more and more active every day. So join us there if you want to talk more about books, and let's get right to it. These are going to be in no particular order. I'm not ranking them or anything like that because since they almost made my top 10 but not quite, I just don't feel like I can say where they rank yet. The first two I'm just going to talk about quickly because I did mention them as honorable mentions in my top 10 series list. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the cards at the end of the video so you can do that. But the first one I want to talk about on that list is the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. This is a fantastic series. I did finish the series and I absolutely loved it, but it just didn't come up to the level of the book series that are currently in my top 10. Who knows, maybe one of these days I'll rethink the list. I'm like, the Dark Tower really deserves to be on that list. But this is one that I could probably easily put like 11 or 12 somewhere in there. It's really, really good, but it just didn't quite make the list. The other one is the Dune saga. And here's why. So Dune is my number one favorite sci-fi book of all time. It is. There's nothing that has dethroned it yet. There's some that have come close, and we'll talk about one here in a minute. But it's still sitting right up there in my number one sci-fi of all time. Other than Dune, I've only read Dune Messiah. I have not read the rest of the Frank Herbert books, and I just didn't feel like I could put it on the list without having read more of the saga. So in terms of top 10 books, Dune is there. Top 10 series, not quite yet. And so that is why Dune is not there. So let's talk Stormlight Archive. There were probably several people that were shocked that Stormlight Archive did not appear anywhere on my top 10. I love the Stormlight Archive. It is a fantastic series. It's just not top 10 quality for me. I like Brandon Sanderson. I like him a lot. I like his magic systems. I like his world building. I like his characters. But there are other authors, other book series that just do it so much better for me. While I really like Brandon Sanderson, he's just not top 10 for me yet. That may change. I know the final book in the first arc of the Stormlight Archive is coming out probably next year sometime. Depending on how that first arc ends, it might catapult it up into my top 10. I just don't know. But for right now, it's definitely in what I would call the bottom 10. It's definitely there. It just hasn't quite reached that top 10 level yet. The next one is the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden. I absolutely adore this series, guys. I have completed this trilogy. It's a wonderful story. Vasya is one of my favorite characters. The world that Catherine Arden created is just beautiful and atmospheric and immersive. The story is so engaging throughout all three books. A lot of people don't like the second and third books for different reasons. I loved every book in the trilogy. But it's one of those situations, again, that it just hasn't quite jumped up there to top 10 level for me yet. After a while, after I've aged a little bit, which I'm still aging, folks, it hasn't stopped, unfortunately. I am getting older. I may rethink it and say, hey, you know what? I think Winter Night deserves to be in my top 10. I want to reread Winter Night at some point for sure. So maybe on a reread, it'll bump up even higher into that top 10 list. The next one is The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. You know me, I love some Arthurian legend, and The Warlord Chronicles is a fabulous series. The first book just didn't quite do it for me, and you've heard me say before that I did not listen to that one on audiobook, and I think if I had, it might have been a better experience for me. But the second and third books just absolutely blew me away. It's one of those that I think may be on a reread, or a re-listen, rather. Audio is the only way to go with those books, folks. Maybe on a re-listen, it will become worthy of my top 10 book series. I just don't know. It's, so far, hasn't wowed me like other book series that went into my top 10 list. And the next series I'm going to talk about is the Dreamer and Muse duology. That is Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This is an absolutely fantastic story, guys. I have completed the reading of it. The ending was difficult for me. I liked the ending, but I really found that I wish it had ended a different way. And I think it's because I got so attached to some of the characters, two characters in particular, whose story I feel could have ended differently. I see why it didn't end the way I wanted it to, and that's fine. But this is absolutely in my top series, just not the top 10. It will probably get there, maybe again on a reread, who knows? Or it may just stay in my top 20. I haven't found anything that it could unseat in that top 10 series list yet. But I love this series, guys, and I highly recommend it to you. The next series on this list is the Hyperion Cantos, specifically the Hyperion duology. This is a bind-up of both books, Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion, and I love this. Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion, the story together, is my second favorite sci-fi of all time. It just barely fell under Dune. I did a book battle video a few weeks back where I pitted Dune and Hyperion in battle together, and Hyperion has a lot going for it, but Dune still won out. But yes, Hyperion is not quite in my top 10 book series of all time. That may change because I have not read Endymion and Rise of Endymion, which completes the Cantos. So maybe once I've completed those and I have the complete story of everything in that world, I may feel differently and put it in my top 10 series list. But boy, I tell you what, this is magnificent, guys, and it's well worth being in my top 20. It almost made it top 10, but not quite. So yeah, it is what it is, right? And the next series on this list is The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. This has a very nostalgic place in my life. It was one of the first fantasy series that I read after coming back to fantasy as an adult. The first one was The Lord of the Rings, which I had never read up until that point, but The Inheritance Cycle was one that I bought on a whim because I thought the book covers were really cool. And I read it, and I loved Aragon, I loved Eldest. Brensinger was good, but it was overly long. It could have been pared down. And Inheritance was kind of the same way. But as a whole, I really loved the series. It has a special place in my kids' hearts, too. They both read the series, so it's one of those that I don't know if it will ever make my top 10 list, but it's close. It could inch up there maybe On a reread, I don't know how well it holds up, so I really can't say whether this will ever make it into the top 10. His Dark Materials is the next one on this list. This is a fantastic, epic fantasy, guys. It really is. It really kind of falls on the border between middle grade and young adult. It's probably more in the young adult category, but there are elements of middle grade in there as well. But I absolutely love the series, and it handles some really controversial topics, and I think it handles them extremely well. It's a very unique world. The characters are beautifully done. The world is well crafted, even though it felt a little bit disjointed at times. I think maybe on a reread it might go up higher, but I still don't know if it'll ever make it into my top 10 book series. But I do want to reread it at some point, especially because I have not read the prequels, which he released in recent years. I think within the last 5 years he's released 2 books in the prequel to the His Dark Materials anthology. So I really love the series, but hasn't quite made it into that top 10. And the final series I want to talk about is the Merlin trilogy by Mary Stewart. This is an Arthurian retelling taken from the perspective of Merlin, and it is just a fantastic series. I have not read it in years, guys. I used to borrow these books from my grandmother. They were just the old, tattered, mass market paperback copies on her bookshelf, and this is a bind up of all 3 books, and I just absolutely love them from what I remember. But because I have not read them in so long, I need to do a reread before I really figure out where they're placed. Nostalgia tells me that it's in my top 20, but I really need to reread the series now as an adult to figure out if it still fits in that top 20 and maybe even the top 10. As I said before, you know Chaz loves a good Arthurian retelling, so that is on this list of books that almost, but not quite, could have been on my top 10 series of all time. And that is the end of this list. Let me know in the comments what you think. What are some of your series that haven't quite made your top 10, but are just maybe inches away from getting up there? I would love to hear some of your picks. And until next time, guys, make sure you read more books. I will talk with you soon.